Why won't it go away? I expected Alberta to chastise me for the outburst, but instead Christian spoke. She hasn't eaten today. She was really hungry earlier. I uncovered my eyes. Alberta's face was filled with concern, and Dmitri now hovered behind her. More shadowy shapes flitted across my vision. Most were indistinct, but I could have sworn I saw something that looked like a skull mixed in with the darkness. I blinked rapidly, and it all disappeared. Alberta turned to one of the flight attendants. "Can you get her something to eat, and find a painkiller?" "Where is it at?" Dmitri asked me. "The pain." With all of this attention, my explosion suddenly seemed excessive. "It's a headache. I'm sure it'll go away." Seeing his stern look, I pointed to the center of my forehead. "It's like something's pushing on my skull, and there's pain kind of behind my eyes. I keep feeling like, well, it's like I've got something in my eye. I think I'm seeing a shadow or something. Then I blink and it's gone." "Ah," said Alberta. "That's a migraine symptom, having vision problems. It's called an aura. People sometimes get it before the headache sets in." "An aura?" I asked, startled. I glanced up at Adrian. He was looking at me over the top of his seat, his long arms hanging over the back of it. "Not that kind," he said, a small smile turning up his lips. "Same name, like court and court. Migraine auras are images and light you see when a migraine's coming on. They have nothing to do with the auras around people I see. But I tell you, the aura I can see, the one around you, wow." "Black?" "And then some. It's obvious even after all the drinks I've had. Never seen anything like it." I didn't know exactly what to make of that, but then the flight attendant returned with a banana, a granola bar, and some ibuprofen. It was a far cry from French toast, but it sounded good on my empty stomach. I consumed it all and then propped a pillow up against the window. Closing my eyes, I rested my head and hoped I could sleep the headache off before we landed. Mercifully, everyone else stayed quiet. I had drifted off a little when I felt a slight touch on my arm. "Rose?" Opening my eyes, I peered at Lissa as she sat in Eddie's seat. Those bat-winged shapes flitted behind her, and my head still hurt. In those swirling shadows, I again saw what looked like a face, this time with a wide, gaping mouth and eyes like fire. I flinched. "You're still in pain?" Lissa asked, peering at me. I blinked, and the face was gone. "Yeah, oh no." I realized what she was going to do. "Don't do it. Don't waste it on me." "It's easy," she said. "It hardly phases me." "Yeah, but the more you use it, the more it hurts you in the long run, even if it's easy now." "I'll worry about that later. Here." She clasped my hand between hers and closed her eyes. Through our bond, I felt the magic welling up in her as she drew upon Spirit's healing power. To her, magic felt warm and golden. I'd been healed before, and it always came through to me as varying temperatures, hot, then cold, then hot, etc. But this time, when she released the magic and sent it into me, I didn't feel anything except a very faint tingle. Her eyelids fluttered open. What happened?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "The headache's still going strong." "But The confusion and shock on her face mirrored what I sensed in her. "I had it. I felt the magic. It worked." "I don't know, Liz. It's okay, really. You haven't been off the meds that long, you know." "Yeah, but I healed Eddie the other day without any problems. And Adrian," she added dryly. He was hanging over the seat again, watching us intently. Those were scrapes, I said. This is a 5-alarm migraine we're talking about. Maybe you've got to build back up. Lissa bit her lower lip. You don't think the pills permanently hurt my magic, do you? Nah, said Adrian, head tilted to the side. You lit up like a supernova when you were summoning it. You had magic. I just don't think it had any effect on her. Why not? She demanded. Maybe she's got something you can't heal. A headache? I asked in disbelief. He shrugged. What do I look like, a doctor? I don't know. Just telling you what I saw. I sighed and placed a hand on my forehead. Well, I appreciate the help, Liz, and I appreciate your annoying commentary, Adrian, but I think sleep might be the best thing for now. Maybe it's stress or something. Sure, why not? Stress was the answer to everything lately. Ghosts, incurable headaches, weird faces floating in the air. Probably can't heal that. Maybe, she said, sounding as though she took personal offense at me having something she couldn't fix. Inside her mind, though, her accusations were turned toward herself, not me. She worried she wasn't good enough. It's okay, I said soothingly. You're just getting your stride back. Once you're up to full power, I'll go crack a rib or something so we can test it. She groaned. The horrible part is that I don't think you're joking. After a quick squeeze of my hand, she stood up. Sleep well. She left, and I soon realized Eddie wasn't coming back. He'd taken a new seat so that I'd have more room. Appreciative, I fluffed and repositioned the pillow while stretching my legs out as best I could across the seats. A few more phantom clouds danced across my vision, and then I closed my eyes to sleep. I woke up later when the plane touched down. The sounds of its engines kicking into reverse startled me out of a deep sleep. To my relief, the headache was gone. So were the weird shapes floating around me. Better? Lissa asked when I stood up and yawned. I nodded. Much. Better still if I can get some real food. Well, she laughed, somehow I doubt there's any shortage of food around here. She was right. Glancing out the windows, I tried to get my first look at our surroundings. We'd made it. We were at the Moroi Royal Court. Chapter 11. We stepped off the plane where we were immediately hit with wet, blustery weather. Sleet cracked into us, far worse than the flaky white stuff falling back in Montana. We were on the East Coast now, or well, close to it. The Queen's Court was in Pennsylvania, near the Pocono Mountains, a range I had only a vague idea about. I knew we weren't too close to any major cities like Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, which were the only ones I knew in the state. The runway we'd landed on was part of the court's property, so we were already behind wards. It was just like the Academy's small landing strip. In fact, in many ways, the royal court was laid out exactly like the school. It was what they told humans the compound was, actually. The court was a collection of buildings, beautiful and ornate, spreading across well-tended grounds adorned with trees and flowers. At least, the land would be adorned with them when spring came. Just like in Montana, the vegetation was bleak and leafless. We were met by a group of 5 guardians, all dressed in black pants and matching coats, with white shirts underneath. They weren't uniforms exactly, but custom usually dictated that for formal occasions. Guardians wear some sort of nice ensemble. By comparison, in our jeans and t-shirts, our group looked like somebody's poor relations. Yet, I couldn't help but think we'd be a lot more comfortable if it came to a fight with Strigoi. The Guardians knew Alberta and Dimitri. Honestly, those 2 knew everybody, and after some formalities, everyone relaxed and became friendly. We were all eager to get in out of the cold, and our escorts led us toward the buildings. I knew enough about the court to know that the largest and most elaborate of the buildings was where all official Moroi business was conducted. It resembled some sort of Gothic palace on the outside, but inside, I suspected it probably looked like any set of modern government offices you'd find among humans. We weren't taken there, however. We were led to an adjacent building, just as exquisite on the outside, but half the size. One of the guardians explained that this was where all guests and dignitaries traveling in and out of court stayed. To my surprise, we each got our own room. Eddie started to protest this, adamantly saying he needed to stay with Lissa. Dmitri smiled and told him it wasn't necessary. In a place like this, guardians didn't need to stay as close to their Moroi. In fact, they often separated to do their own things. The court was as heavily warded as the academy, and really, Moroi visitors at the academy were rarely trailed so closely by their guardians either. It was only for the sake of the field experience that it was being done with us. Eddie agreed with some reluctance, and again I was amazed at his dedication. Alberta spoke briefly and then turned to the rest of us. Decompress a bit and be ready for dinner in 4 hours. Lissa, the Queen wants to see you in an hour. A jolt of surprise ran through Lissa, and she and I exchanged brief, puzzled looks. The last time Lissa had seen the Queen, Tatiana had snubbed her and embarrassed her in front of the whole school for having run away with me. Both of us wondered what she'd want to see Lissa about now. Sure, said Lissa. Rose and I'll be ready. Alberta shook her head. Rose isn't going. The Queen specifically asked for you alone. Of course she had. What interest would the Queen have in Valisa Dragomir's shadow? A nasty voice whispered in my head, expendable, expendable. The dark sentiment startled me, and I shoved it aside. I went to my room, relieved to see it had a TV. The thought of vegging for the next 4 hours sounded fantastic. The rest of the room was pretty fancy, very modern-looking, with sleek black tables and white leather furniture. I was kind of afraid to sit on it. Ironically, despite how nice it all was, the place wasn't as decked out as the ski resort that we'd stayed in over the holidays. I guessed when you came to the royal court, you came for business, not a vacation. I had just sprawled on the leather couch and turned on the TV when I felt Lissa in my mind. Come talk, she said. I sat up, surprised by the message itself and the content. Usually our bond was all about feelings and impressions. Specific requests like this were rare. I got up and left the room, going to the one next door. Lissa opened the door. What? You couldn't have come to me? I asked. Sorry, she said, looking like she genuinely meant it. It was hard to be grouchy around someone so nice. I just didn't have the time. I'm trying to decide what to wear. Her suitcase was already open on the bed, with things hung up in the closet. Unlike me, she'd come prepared for every occasion, formal and casual alike. I lay down on the couch. Hers was plush velvet, not leather. Wear the print blouse with the black slacks, I told her. Not a dress. Why not a dress? Because you don't want to look like you're groveling. This is the Queen, Rose. Dressing up is showing respect, not groveling. If you say so. But Lissa wore the outfit I suggested anyway. She talked to me as she finished getting ready, and I watched with envy as she applied makeup. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed cosmetics myself. When she and I had lived with humans, I'd been pretty diligent about primping every day. Now, there never seemed to be enough time, or any reason. I was always in some kind of scuffle that made makeup pointless, and ruined it anyway. The most I could do was to slather my face with moisturizer. It seemed excessive in the mornings, like I was putting on a mask. Yet by the time I faced the cold weather and other harsh conditions, I was always surprised to see my skin had sucked all the moisture up. The smallest pang of regret shot through me that I'd rarely have any opportunities to do this for the rest of my life. Lissa would spend most of her days dressed up, out at royal functions. No one would notice me. It was weird, considering that until this last year, I'd always been the one who was always noticed. "Why do you think she wants to see me?" Lissa asked. "Maybe to explain why we're here." "Maybe." Unease filled Lissa, despite her calm exterior. She still hadn't entirely recovered from the Queen's brutal humiliation last fall. My own petty jealousy and moping suddenly seemed stupid when compared with what she had to go through. I mentally slapped myself, reminding myself that I wasn't just her unseen guardian. I was also her best friend, and we hadn't talked very much lately. "You have nothing to be afraid of, Liz. You haven't done anything wrong. And really, you've been doing everything right. Your grades are perfect. Your behavior's perfect. Remember all those people you impressed on the ski trip? That bitch has nothing to get on you about." "You shouldn't say that," Lissa said automatically. She applied mascara to her eyelashes, studied them, and then added another coat. "Just call 'em like I see 'em. If she gives you any grief, then it's just going to be because she's afraid of you." Lissa laughed. "Why would she be afraid of me?" "Because people are drawn to you, and people like her don't like it when others steal all the attention." I was a bit astonished at how wise I sounded. "Plus, you're the last Dragomir. You're always going to be in the spotlight. Who's she? Just another Ivashkov. There are a ton of them, probably because all the guys are like Adrian and have all sorts of illegitimate children." "Adrian doesn't have any children." "That we know of," I said mysteriously. She snickered and stepped back from the mirror, pleased with her face. "Why are you always so mean to Adrian?" I gave her a look of mock astonishment. "You're standing up for Adrian now? Whatever happened to you warning me to stay away from him? You practically bit my head off the first time I hung out with him, and that wasn't even by my choice." She took a thin golden chain out of her suitcase and tried to fasten it around her neck. "Well, yeah. I didn't really know him then. He's not so bad. And it's true. I mean, he's not a great role model or anything, but I also think some of the stories about him and other girls are exaggerated." "I don't," I said, jumping up. She still hadn't managed to fasten the chain, so I took it and put the clasp together for her. "Thanks," she said, running her hands over the necklace. "I think Adrian really likes you, like, in a wanting to be serious way." I shook my head and stepped back. "Nope, he likes me in a wanting to get the clothes off the cute Dampier way." "I don't believe that." "That's because you believe the best about everyone." She looked skeptical as she began brushing her hair smooth over her shoulders. "I don't know about that either, but I do think he's not as bad as you think. I know it hasn't been that long since Mason, but you should think about going out with someone else." "Wear your hair up." I handed her a barrette from her suitcase. "Mason and I were never really going out. You know that." "Yeah, well, I guess that's more reason to start thinking about dating someone. High school's not over yet. Seems like you should be doing something fun." Fun. It was ironic. Months ago, I'd argued with Dimitri about how it wasn't fair that as a guardian in training, I had to watch my reputation and not act too crazy. He'd agreed it wasn't fair that I couldn't do the kinds of things other girls my age could, but that was the price I paid for my future. I'd been upset, But after Victor's meddling, I started to see Dimitri's point, to such an extent that he'd actually hinted I shouldn't try to limit myself that much. Now, after Spokane, I felt like a completely different girl from the one who talked to Dimitri last fall about having fun. I was only a couple months from graduation. High school things, dances, boyfriends, what did they matter in the grand scheme of things? Everything at the academy seemed so trivial, unless it was making me a better guardian. I don't really think I need a boyfriend to complete my high school experience, I told her. I don't think you do either, she agreed, tugging her ponytail straight. But you used to flirt and go out sometimes. I feel like it'd just be nice for you to do a little of that. It's not like you have to have anything serious with Adrian. Well, you won't get any arguments from him on that. I think the last thing he wants is anything serious. That's the problem. Well, according to some of the stories, he's very serious. I heard the other day that you were engaged. Someone else said that he'd been disowned because he told his dad he'd never love anyone else. There was really no other adequate response to all these silly rumors. The creepy thing is that the same stories are all over the place at the elementary campus, too. I stared at the ceiling. Why does this stuff keep happening to me? She walked over to the couch and looked down on me. Because you're awesome, and everyone loves you. Nah, you're the one everyone loves. Well then, I guess we're both awesome and lovable. And one of these days, a mischievous sparkle danced in her eyes. We'll find a guy you love back. Don't hold your breath. None of that matters. Not right now. You're the one I've got to worry about. We're going to graduate, and you'll go off to college, and it'll be great. No more rules, just us on our own. It's a little scary, she mused, thinking about being on my own, but you'll be with me, and Dimitri too. She sighed. I can't imagine not having you around. I can't even really remember when you weren't around. I sat up and gave her a light punch in her arm. Hey, be careful. You're going to make Christian jealous. Oh, crap. I suppose he's going to be around too, huh? No matter where we end up going? Probably. You, me, him, Dimitri, and any guardians Christian gets. One big happy family. I scoffed, but inside of me there was a warm, fuzzy feeling building. Things were crazy in our world right now, but I had all these great people in my life. As long as we were all together, everything would be okay. She looked at the clock, and her fear returned. I've got to go. Will you go with me? You know I can't. I know, not in body, but like, will you do that thing where you're watching in my head? It'll make me feel like I'm not alone. It was the first time Lissa had ever asked me to purposefully do that. Normally, she hated the thought of me seeing through her eyes. It was a sign of how nervous she really was. Sure, I said. It's probably better than anything on TV anyway. I returned to my own room, taking up an identical position on the couch. Clearing my thoughts, I opened myself up to Lissa's mind, going beyond simply knowing her feelings. It was something the shadow-kissed bond allowed me to do, and was the most intense part of our connection. It wasn't just feeling her thoughts. It was actually being inside of her, looking through her eyes and sharing her experiences. I'd learned to control it only recently. I used to slip in without wanting to, much as I sometimes couldn't keep her feelings out. I could control my out-of-body experiences now, and even summon up the phenomenon at will, just like I was about to do. Lissa had just reached the parlor the Queen was waiting in. Moroi might use terms like royal and even kneel sometimes, but there were no thrones or anything like that here. Tatiana sat in an ordinary armchair, dressed in a navy blue skirt and blazer, looking more like a corporate businesswoman than any sort of monarch. She wasn't alone either. A tall, stately Moroi whose blonde hair was laced with silver sat near her. I recognized her. Priscilla Voda, the Queen's friend and advisor. We'd met her on the ski trip, and she'd been impressed with Lissa. I took her presence as a good sign. Silent guardians, dressed in black and white, stood along the wall. To my astonishment, Adrian was there too. He reclined on a small love seat, seeming completely oblivious to the fact that he was hanging out with the Moroi's ultimate leader. The guardian with Lissa announced her. Princess Vasilisa Dragomir. Tatiana nodded in acknowledgement. Welcome, Vasilisa. Please, sit down. Lissa sat down near Adrian, her apprehension growing by leaps and bounds. A Moroi servant came by and offered tea or coffee, but Lissa declined. Tatiana meanwhile sipped from a teacup and scrutinized Lissa from head to toe. Priscilla Voda broke the awkward silence. Remember what I said about her? Priscilla asked cheerfully. She was very impressive at our state dinner in Idaho. Settled a huge spat over Moroi fighting with guardians. She even managed to calm Adrian's father down. A frosty smile crossed Tatiana's cold features. This is impressive. Half the time I still feel like Nathan is 12 years old. Me too, said Adrian, drinking from a wine glass. Tatiana ignored him and again focused on Lissa. Everyone seems impressed with you, really. I hear nothing but good things about you, in spite of your past transgressions, which I'm given to understand weren't entirely without their reasons. Lissa's look of surprise actually made the Queen laugh. There wasn't much warmth or humor in the laugh, though. Yes, I know all about your powers, and of course I know what happened with Victor. Adrian's been filling me in about Spirit as well. It's so strange. Tell me, can you... She glanced to a nearby table. A flower pot sat on it, dark green shoots sticking through the soil. It was some kind of bulb-based plant that someone was growing indoors. Like its outside counterparts, it was waiting for spring. Lissa hesitated. Using her powers in front of others was a strange thing for her, but Tatiana was watching expectantly. After only a few moments more, Lissa leaned over and touched the shoots. The stems shot up through the dirt, growing taller, almost a foot high. Huge pods formed along the sides as it grew, bursting open to reveal fragrant white flowers. Easter lilies. Lissa withdrew her hand. Wonder showed on Tatiana's face, and she muttered something in a language I didn't understand. She hadn't been born in the United States, but had chosen to hold her court here. She spoke with no accent, but, as they did for Dmitri, moments of surprise apparently brought out her native tongue. Within seconds, she put her stately mask back on. Interesting, she said. Talk about an understatement. It could be very useful, said Priscilla. Vasilisa and Adrian can't be the only two out there with it. If we could find others, so much could be learned. The healing itself is a gift, let alone anything else they can conjure. Just think what we could do with it. Lissa turned optimistic. For a while, she'd been going out of her way to find others like her. Adrian had been the only one she'd discovered, and that had been through sheer luck. If the Queen and Moroi Council put their resources into it, there was no telling what they might find. Yet something about Priscilla's words troubled Lissa. "Begging your pardon, Princess Voda, I'm not sure we should be so eager to use my, or others', healing powers as much as you might want to." "Why not?" asked Tatiana. "From what I understand, you can heal almost anything." "I can," said Lissa slowly, "and I want to. I wish I could help everybody, but I can't. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'll definitely help some people. But I know we'd run into other people like Victor who would want to abuse it. And after a while, I mean, how do you choose? Who gets to live? Part of life is that, well, some people have to die. My powers aren't a prescription you can get filled as needed, and honestly, I'm afraid they would only be used for, certain kinds of people, just like the Guardians are." A slight tension built in the room. What Lissa had insinuated was rarely ever mentioned in public. "What are you talking about?" asked Tatiana, with narrow eyes. I could tell she already knew. Lissa was scared to say her next words, but she did it anyway. "Everyone knows there's a certain, method to how Guardians are distributed. Only the elite get them. Royals, rich people, people in power." A chill fell over the room. Tatiana's mouth settled into a straight line. She didn't speak for several moments, and I had a feeling everyone else was holding their breath. I certainly was. "You don't think our royals deserve special protection?" she asked finally. "You don't think you do, the last of the Dragomirs?" "I think keeping our leaders safe is important, yeah. But I also think we need to stop sometimes and look at what we're doing. It could be time to reconsider the way we've always done things." Lissa sounded so wise and so self-assured. I was proud of her. Watching Priscilla Voda, I could see that she was proud too. She'd liked Lissa from the beginning, but I could also tell that Priscilla was nervous. She answered to the Queen and knew that Lissa was swimming in dangerous waters. Tatiana sipped her tea. I think it was an excuse to gather her thoughts. "I understand," she said, "that you're also in favor of Moroi fighting with the Guardians and attacking Strigoi." Another dangerous topic, one Lissa pushed forward into. "I think if there are Moroi who want to, they shouldn't be denied the chance." Jill suddenly popped into my head. "Moroi lives are precious," said the Queen. "They shouldn't be risked." "Dhampir lives are precious too," Lissa countered. "If they fight with Moroi, it could save everybody. And again, if Moroi are willing, why deny them? They deserve to know how to defend themselves, and people like Tasha Ozera have developed ways of fighting with magic." The mention of Christian's aunt brought a frown to the Queen's face. Tasha had been attacked by Strigoi when younger and had spent the rest of her life learning to fight back. "Tasha Ozera. She's a troublemaker. She's starting to gather a lot of other troublemakers." "She's trying to introduce new ideas." I noticed then that Lissa wasn't afraid any longer. She was confident in her beliefs and wanted them expressed. Throughout history, people with new ideas, who think differently and try to change things, have always been called troublemakers. But seriously, do you want the truth? A wry look crossed Tatiana's face, almost a smile. "Always." "We need change. I mean, our traditions are important. We shouldn't give up on those. But sometimes I think we're misguided." "Misguided?" "As time's gone on, we've gone along with other changes. We've evolved. Computers, electricity, technology in general. We all agree those make our lives better. Why can't we be the same in the way we act? Why are we still clinging to the past when there are better ways to do things? Lissa was breathless, worked up and excited. Her cheeks felt warm and her heart raced. All of us were watching Tatiana, searching for any clue in that stony face. "You're very interesting to talk to," she finally said. She made interesting sound like a dirty word. "But I have things I must do now." She stood up, and everyone hastily followed suit, even Adrian. "I won't be joining you for dinner, but you and your companions will have everything you need. I'll see you tomorrow at the trial. No matter how radical and naively idealistic your ideas are, I'm glad you'll be there to complete his sentencing. His imprisonment, at least, is something we can all agree on." Tatiana swept out, 2 guardians immediately following. Priscilla followed too, leaving Lissa and Adrian alone. "Well done, cousin. Aren't many people who can throw the old lady off balance like that." She didn't seem very off balance. Oh, she was, believe me. Most of the people she deals with every day wouldn't talk to her like that, let alone someone your age. He stood up and extended a hand to Lissa. "Come on, I'll show you around this place. Take your mind off things." "I've been here before," she said, "when I was younger." "Yeah, well, the things we get to see when we're young are different than the things we get to see when we're older. Did you know there's a 24-hour bar in here? We'll get you a drink." "I don't want a drink." "You will before this trip's over." I left Lissa's head and returned to my room. The meeting with the Queen was over, and Lissa didn't need my unseen support. Besides, I didn't really want to hang out with Adrian right now. Sitting up, I discovered I felt surprisingly alert. Being in her head had kind of been like taking a nap. I decided to do a little exploring of my own. I'd never been to the royal court. It really was supposed to be like a mini town, and I wondered what other things there were to see, aside from the bar that Adrian probably lived in while visiting. I headed downstairs, figuring I'd have to go outside. As far as I knew, this building only held guest rooms. It was kind of like the palace's hotel. When I got to the entryway, however, I saw Christian and Eddie standing and talking with someone I couldn't see. Eddie, ever vigilant, saw me and grinned. "Hey, Rose, look who we found." As I approached, Christian stepped aside, revealing the mystery person. I came to a halt, and she grinned at me. "Hi, Rose." A moment later, I felt a smile slowly creep over my face. "Hello, Maya." Chapter 12. If you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have said that there was no way I'd be happy to run into Maya Rinaldi at the royal court. She was a year younger than me and had held a grudge against Lissa since freshman year. A grudge so big that Maya had gone to great extremes to make life miserable for us. She'd done a good job. Jesse and Ralph's rumors about me had been a result of her efforts. But then Maya had gone with us to Spokane and had been captured by the Strigoi. Just like for Christian and Eddie, that had changed everything. She'd seen the same horrors the rest of us had. In fact, she was the only one of my friends who had witnessed Mason's death and me killing Strigoi. She had even saved my life then by using her water magic to temporarily drown one of the Strigoi. In the great Moroi argument about whether or not they should learn to fight with the Guardians, she was firmly on the fighting side. I hadn't seen Maya in almost a month, ever since Mason's funeral. In studying her, I felt like it'd been a year. I had always thought Maya looked like a doll. She was short compared to most Moroi, and had young, round-cheeked features. The fact that she'd always curled her hair in perfect ringlets had sort of reinforced that image. But today, she hadn't gone to nearly that much trouble. Her golden blonde hair was pulled into a ponytail, its only curl coming from a slight natural waviness. She wore no makeup, and her face showed signs of having been outdoors a lot. Her skin looked chapped from the wind, and she had a very, very faint tan, almost unheard of for Moroi, with their aversion to sunlight. For the first time ever, she actually looked her age. She laughed at my shock. "Come on, it hasn't been that long. You look like you don't even recognize me." "I almost don't." We hugged, and again, it was hard to believe that she'd once plotted ways to ruin my life, or that I'd broken her nose. "What are you doing here?" She beckoned us out the door. "We were just about to leave. I'll explain everything." We went to a neighboring building. It wasn't like a mall or anything, but it did have a few businesses that the Moroi who worked and visited here needed. A handful of restaurants, some small stores, and offices that offered all sorts of services. There was also a coffee shop, and that was where Maya led us. A coffee shop seems like an ordinary thing, but I rarely got to go to them. Sitting in a public place, or semi-public, with friends not worrying about school, it was great. It reminded me of when Lissa and I had been on our own, when our entire lives hadn't been contained within a school and its rules. "My dad works here now," she told us, "and so now I live here." Moroi children rarely lived with their parents. They were sent off to places like St. Vladimir's, where they could grow up safely. "What about school?" I asked. "There aren't many kids here, but there are some. Most of them are rich and have personal tutors. My dad pulled some strings and set it up so that I can go to them for different subjects. So I'm still studying the same things, just in a different way. It's actually pretty cool. Less teacher time, but more homework." "You've been doing more than that," said Eddie, "unless your classes are outside." He'd noticed the same things I had, and in looking at her hands as they held her latte, I could now see calluses. She wiggled her fingers. "I made friends with some of the guardians here. They've been showing me a few things." "That's risky," said Christian, though he sounded like he approved, "since there's still a debate about Moroi fighting." "You mean about Moroi fighting with magic?" she corrected. "That's what's controversial. No one's really talking about Moroi fighting hand-to-hand." "Well, they are," I said. "It's just been overshadowed by the magic controversy." "It's not illegal," she said primly. "And until it is, I'm going to keep doing it. You think with all the events and meetings that go on around here that anyone even notices what someone like me does?" Maya's family, in addition to being non-royal, was also pretty lower class. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but she had to feel the effects of that around here. Still, I found her whole situation cheering. Maya seemed happier and more open than she had been during the entire time I'd known her. She seemed free. Christian spoke my thoughts before I could. "You've changed," he said. "We've all changed," she corrected. "Especially you, Rose. I can't quite explain it." "I don't think there's any way the five of us couldn't have changed," Christian pointed out. A moment later he corrected himself. "4 of us." We all fell silent, thoughts of Mason weighing us down. Being with Christian, Eddie, and Maya stirred up that grief I'd always tried to hide, and I could see from their faces that they continually fought the same battle. Conversation eventually turned toward all of us catching up on what had happened here and at the academy. Yet I kept thinking about how Maya had said that I had changed more than the others. All I could think about was how out of control I'd felt lately, how half the time my actions and feelings didn't seem like my own. Sitting there, it almost seemed like Maya was controlled by all of her positive traits now, and I was controlled by my negative ones. Conversations with Adrian replayed through my head, reminding me about how I supposedly had such a dark, dark aura. Maybe thinking about him summoned him, but he and Lissa eventually joined us. Their bar was probably in the same building, I realized. I'd been blocking her out and not paying much attention. Adrian hadn't completely gotten her drunk, thankfully, but she'd agreed to 2 drinks. I could feel a slight buzz through the bond and had to carefully shield it out. She was as surprised as we'd been to see Maya, but gave her a warm welcome and wanted to catch up. I'd heard most of this already, so I just listened and drank my chai. No coffee for me. Most guardians drank it the way Moroi drank blood, but I wouldn't touch the stuff. "How'd your thing with the Queen go?" Christian asked Lissa at one point. "Not so bad," she said. "I mean, not great either, but she didn't yell at me or humiliate me, so that's a start." "Stop being modest," said Adrian, putting his arm around her. "Princess Dragomir totally stood her ground. You should have seen it." Lissa laughed. "I don't suppose she mentioned why she decided to let us come to the trial?" Christian asked stiffly. He didn't look very happy about the bonding that was taking place here, or about Adrian's arm. Lissa's laughter faded, but she was still smiling. "Adrian did it." "What?" Christian and I asked together. Adrian looked very pleased with himself, stayed quiet for a change, and let Lissa do the talking. "He convinced her that we needed to be here. He apparently harassed her until she gave in." "It's called persuasion, not harassment," Adrian said. Lissa laughed again. My own words about the Queen came back to haunt me. Who's she? Just another Ivashkov? There are a ton of them. There were indeed. I eyed Adrian. "How closely are you guys related?" The answer popped into my head from Lissa's. "She's your aunt." "Great aunt. And I'm her favorite great-nephew. Well, I'm her only great-nephew, but that's not important. I'd still be her favorite," he said. "Unbelievable," said Christian. "I'll second that," I said. "None of you appreciate me. Why is it so hard to believe that I could make a real contribution in these dark times?" Adrian stood up. He was trying to sound outraged, but the smirk on his face indicated that he still found all of this pretty funny. "My cigarettes and I are going outside. At least they show me respect." As soon as he left, Christian asked Lissa, "Were you getting drunk with him?" "I'm not drunk. I only had 2 drinks," she said. "Since when did you get all conservative?" "Since Adrian became a bad influence." "Come on! He helped us get here. No one else was able to do it. He didn't have to, but he did. And you and Rose are sitting there, still acting like he's the most evil person on the planet." That wasn't exactly true. I was mostly sitting there like I'd been hit in the head, still too dumbstruck to react. "Yeah, and I'm sure he did it out of the kindness of his heart," muttered Christian. "Why else would he do it?" "Oh, gee, I wonder." Lissa's eyes widened. "You think he did it for me? You think there's something going on with us?" "You guys drink together, practice magic together, and go to elitist events together? What would you think?" Maya and Eddie looked like they wanted to be somewhere else. I was starting to share the feeling. Anger burned through Lissa, hitting me like a wave of heat. She was utterly outraged. Her fury didn't even have that much to do with Adrian, really. She was more upset at the thought of Christian not trusting her. And as for him, I needed no psychic powers to understand how he was feeling. He wasn't jealous simply because she was hanging out with Adrian. Christian was still jealous that Adrian had the kind of influence to pull this off for her. It was just like what Jessie and Ralph had described, about how the right connections could open the right doors, connections that Christian didn't have. I kneed Christian's leg, hoping he'd get the hint that he really should stop talking before things got worse. Lissa's anger was intensifying, muddled with embarrassment as she began to doubt herself and wonder if she had been getting too close to Adrian. The whole thing was ridiculous. Christian, for the love of God, if Adrian did this for anyone, it was because of me and his crazy obsession. He bragged a while ago that he could do it, and I didn't believe it. I turned to Lissa. I needed to get her calm and diffuse those dark feelings that could cause so much trouble for her when they ran out of control. Liz, you might not be wasted exactly, but you need to chill out for an hour before having this conversation. You're going to say something as stupid as Christian, and I'll be the one who has to deal with the mess, like always. I'd gotten worked up and expected someone to tell me how bitchy I sounded. Instead, Lissa relaxed and offered Christian a smile. Yeah, we should definitely talk about this later. A lot's kind of happened today. He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. Sorry I jumped all over you. He returned her smile, fight patched up. So? Lissa asked Maya. Who have you met here? I stared at them in amazement, but no one seemed to notice. I'd fixed their fight, and there'd been no acknowledgement. No, thank you, Rose, for pointing out how idiotic we're being. It was bad enough I had to endure their romance day after day, with no consideration for how I felt. Now I was salvaging their relationship, and they didn't even realize it. I'll be right back, I said, interrupting Maya's description of some of the other teenagers here. I was afraid if I sat there, I was going to say something I'd regret, or maybe break a chair. Where had all this rage come from? I went outside, hoping a gulp of cold air would calm me down. Instead, I got a face full of clove smoke. Don't start in about the smoking, warned Adrian. He was leaning against the building's brick wall. You didn't have to come outside. You knew I was here. That's actually why I'm here. Well, that and I felt like I was going to go crazy if I stayed inside another minute. He tilted his head to look at my face. His eyebrows shot up. You aren't kidding, are you? What happened? You were fine a few minutes ago. I paced across the ground in front of him. I don't know. I was fine. Then Christian and Lissa started having this stupid argument over you. It was weird. They were the ones who were mad, and then I ended up madder than both of them. Wait, they were arguing over me? Yes, I just said that. Weren't you paying attention? Hey, don't snap at me. I haven't done anything to you. I crossed my arms over my chest. Christian's jealous because you hang around Lissa so much. We're studying spirit, said Adrian. He's welcome to join in. Yeah, well, no one ever said love was reasonable. Seeing you come back together kind of set him off, and then he got upset because you pulled rank with the Queen for Lissa. I didn't do it for her. I did it all for you. But, well, you especially. I came to a halt in front of him. I didn't believe you. That you could do it. He grinned. Guess you should have listened to my family history in that dream after all. I guess. I just thought... I couldn't finish. I'd thought Dmitri would be the one who came through for me, the one who, despite what he said, could make almost anything happen, but he hadn't. "Thought what?" Adrian prompted. "Nothing." With much effort, I managed to utter the next words. "Thank you for helping us." "Oh my God," he said. "A kind word from Rose Hathaway. I can die a happy man." "What are you saying? That I'm normally an ungrateful bitch?" He just looked at me. "Hey, not cool." "Maybe you could redeem yourself with a hug." I glared. "A small one?" he begged. With a sigh, I walked over and put one arm around Adrian, leaning my head lightly against his arm. "Thanks, Adrian." We stood like that for a heartbeat. I felt none of the crazy electricity or connection I did with Dmitri, but I had to admit that Lissa had been right about something. Adrian was annoying and arrogant at times, but he really wasn't the bastard I often made him out to be. The doors opened, and Lissa and the others stepped outside. They understandably looked surprised, but I didn't care just then. Besides, they probably all thought I was pregnant with Adrian's love child, so what did it matter? I backed away. "Heading out?" I asked. "Yeah. Maya's got more important things to do than hang out with us," joked Christian. "Hey, I just told my dad I'd meet him. I'll see you guys before I leave." She started to walk away, then abruptly turned around. "God, I'm so out of it." She reached into her coat pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. "This is half the reason I found you guys. One of the court clerks wanted me to give this to you." "Thanks," I said, puzzled. She headed off to see her dad while the rest of us strolled back to our accommodations. I slowed my pace and opened the note, wondering who in the world here would want to contact me. Rose, I was so happy to hear about your arrival. I'm sure it'll make tomorrow's proceedings that much more entertaining. I've been curious for quite some time about how Vasilisa is doing, and your romantic escapades are always an amusing diversion. I can't wait to share them in the courtroom tomorrow. Best, V.D. "Who's it from?" asked Eddie, coming up beside me. I hastily folded it up and shoved it into my pocket. "No one," I replied. No one, indeed. V.D. Victor Dashkov. Chapter 13. When we got back to our rooms, I made up an excuse to Lissa about how I needed to take care of some guardian stuff. She was eager to patch up the earlier conflict with Christian, probably in the form of clothing removal, and I didn't ask any questions. There was a phone in my room, and after calling an operator, I was able to find out which room was Dimitri's. He was surprised to see me at his door, and a little wary. The last time this had happened, I'd been under the influence of Victor's lust charm and had behaved aggressively. "I have to talk to you," I said. He let me come in, and I immediately handed over the note. V.D. "Yeah, I know," said Dmitri. He handed the note back. "Victor Dashkov." "What are we going to do? I mean, we talked about this, but now he really is saying he's going to sell us out." Dmitri didn't answer, and I could tell he was assessing every angle of this, just like he would a fight. Finally, he pulled out his cell phone, which was a lot cooler than having to rely on the room's phone. "Give me a moment." I started to sit on his bed, decided that was dangerous, and instead sat on the couch. I didn't know who he was calling, but the conversation took place in Russian. "What's going on?" I asked when he finished. I'll let you know soon. For now, we have to wait. Great. My favorite thing to do. He dragged an armchair up and sat opposite me. It seemed too small for someone as tall as him, but, as always, he managed to make it work and appear graceful in the process. Beside me was one of the Western novels he always carried around. I picked it up, again thinking about how alone he was. Even now, at the court, he'd chosen to stay in his room. Why do you read these? Some people read books for fun, he observed. Hey, watch the dig, and I do read books. I read them to solve mysteries that threaten my best friend's life and sanity. I don't think reading this cowboy stuff is really saving the world like I do. He took it from me and flipped it over, face thoughtful and not as intense as usual. Like any book, it's an escape, and there's something, I don't know, something appealing about the Old West. No rules. Everyone just lives by their own code. You don't have to be tied down by others' ideas of right and wrong in order to bring justice. Wait, I laughed. I thought I was the only one who wanted to break rules. I didn't say I wanted to, just that I can see the appeal. You can't fool me, comrade. You want to put on a cowboy hat and keep lawless bank robbers in line. No time. I have enough trouble keeping you in line. I grinned, and suddenly, it was a lot like when we cleaned the church, before the fight at least. Easy, comfortable. In fact, it was a lot like the old days when we'd first begun training together, way back before everything had gotten so complicated. Well, okay, things had always been complicated, but for a while they'd been less complicated. It made me sad. I wished we could relive those early days. There'd been no Viktor Dashkov, no blood on my hands. I'm sorry, Dmitri said all of a sudden. For what, reading cheesy novels? For not being able to get you here. I feel like I let you down. I glimpsed a shadow of worry on his face, like he was concerned he might have caused some irreparable damage. The apology totally caught me off guard. For a moment, I wondered if he was jealous of Adrian's influence in the same way Christian had been. Then I realized it was completely different. I'd been giving Dmitri a hard time because I'd been convinced he could do anything. Somewhere, deep inside, he felt the same, at least where I was concerned. He didn't want to deny me anything. My earlier bad mood had long since vanished, and I suddenly just felt drained and stupid. You didn't, I told him. I acted like a total brat. You've never let me down before. You didn't let me down with this. The grateful look he gave me made me feel as if I had wings. If another moment had passed, I suspected he would have said something so sweet that I would have flown away. Instead, his phone rang. Another conversation in Russian took place, and then he stood up. All right, let's go. Where? To see Viktor Dashkov. It turned out that Dmitri had a friend who had a friend, and somehow, despite the best security in the Moroi world, we managed to get into the court's prison facilities. Why are we doing this? I whispered as we walked down the hall toward Victor's cell. I'd really hoped for stone walls and torches, but the place looked very modern and efficient, with marble floors and stark white walls. At least there were no windows. You think we can talk him out of it? Dmitri shook his head. If Viktor wanted to take revenge on us, he'd do it without any warning. He doesn't do things without reason. The fact that he told you first means he wants something, and now we're going to find out what it is. We reached Viktor's cell. He was the only prisoner currently being held. Like the rest of the facility, his room reminded me of something you'd find at a hospital. Everything was clean, bright, and sterile, and very bare. It was a place without any sort of stimulus or distraction whatsoever, which would have driven me crazy in 1 hour. The cell had silvery bars that looked very hard to break, which was the most important part. Victor sat in a chair, idly examining his nails. It had been 3 months since our last meeting, and seeing him again made my skin crawl. Feelings I hadn't known were buried in me suddenly burst to the surface. One of the hardest things of all was seeing him look so healthy and strong. He'd bought that health by torturing Lissa, and I hated him for it. If his disease had run its normal course, he might be dead by now. He had receding black hair, with only the slightest touch of silver. He was in his 40s and had a regal, almost handsome cut to his face. He glanced up at our approach. Eyes the same pale jade as Lissa's met mine. The Dragomir and Dashkov families had a lot of intertwined history, and it was creepy seeing that eye color in someone else. A smile lit his face. "Oh my, this is a treat. Lovely Rosemary, practically an adult now." His eyes flicked toward Dmitri. "Of course, some have been treating you that way for quite a while." I pressed my face to the bars. "Stop screwing with us, you son of a bitch. What do you want?" Dmitri put a gentle hand on my shoulder and pulled me back. "Easy, Rose." I took a deep breath and then slowly stepped backward. Victor straightened up in his chair and laughed. "After all this time, your cub still hasn't learned any control. But then, maybe you never really wanted her to." "We aren't here to banter," said Dmitri calmly. "You wanted to lure Rose over, and now we need to know why." "Does there have to be some sinister reason? I just wanted to know how she was doing, and something tells me we aren't going to have a chance for any friendly chats tomorrow." That annoying smirk stayed on his face, and I decided that he was lucky to be behind bars and out of my reach. "We're not going to have a friendly chat now," I growled. "You think I'm joking, but I'm not. I really do want to know how you're doing. You've always been a fascinating subject to me, Rosemary. The only shadow-kissed person we know of. I told you before, that isn't the kind of thing you walk away from unscathed. There's no way you can quietly sink into the regimented routine of academic life. People like you aren't meant to blend in." "I'm not some kind of science experiment." He acted like I hadn't said anything. "What's it been like? What have you noticed?" "There's no time for this, if you don't get to the point," warned Dmitri. "We're going to leave." I didn't understand how Dmitri could sound so calm. I leaned forward and gave Victor my coldest smile. "There's no way they'll let you off tomorrow. I hope you enjoy prison. I bet it'll be great once you get sick again. And you will, you know." Victor regarded me levelly, still with that amused look that made me want to choke him. "All things die, Rose. Well, except for you, I suppose. Or maybe you are dead. I don't know. Those who visit the world of the dead can probably never fully shake their connection to it." There was a snarky retort on my lips, but something held me back. Those who visit the world of the dead. What if my Mason sightings weren't because I was crazy, or because he was seeking revenge? What if there was something about me, something that had happened when I died and come back, that was now connecting me to Mason? It was Victor who had first explained what it meant to be shadow-kissed. I wondered now if he had any of the answers I'd been looking for. My face must have given away something, because Victor gave me a speculative look. Yes? There's something you'd like to say? I hated to ask him for anything. It made my stomach turn. Swallowing my pride, I asked, "What is the world of the dead? Is it heaven or hell?" "Neither," he said. "What lives there?" I exclaimed. "Ghosts? Will I go back? Do things come out of it?" Victor was taking great pleasure in me having to come to him for information, just as I'd feared he would. I saw that smirk intensify. "Well, clearly some things come out of it, because here you stand before us." "He's baiting you," said Dmitri. "Let it go." Victor gave Dmitri a brief glare. "I'm helping her." He turned back to me. "Honestly, I don't know that much about it. You're the one that has been there, Rose, not me. Not yet. Someday you'll probably be the one educating me. I'm sure the more you deal death out, the closer you'll become to it." "Enough," said Dmitri, voice harsh. "We're going." Wait, said Victor, voice congenial. "You haven't told me about Vasilisa yet." I moved forward again. "Stay away from her. She doesn't have anything to do with this." Victor gave me a dry look. "Seeing as I'm locked away here, I have no choice but to stay away from her, my dear. And you're wrong. Vasilisa has everything to do with everything." "That's it," I said, suddenly getting it. "That's why you sent the note. You wanted me here because you wanted to know about her, and you knew there was no way she'd come talk to you herself. You had nothing to blackmail her with." "Blackmail's an ugly word." "There's no way you're going to see her, at least outside of the courtroom. She's never going to heal you. I told you. You're going to get sick again, and you're going to die. You're going to be the one sending me postcards from the other side." "You think that's what this is about? You think my needs are that petty?" The mockery was gone, replaced by a feverish and almost fanatical look in his green eyes. The tight set of his mouth stretched the skin of his face a little, and I noticed he'd lost weight since our last encounter. Maybe prison had been harder on him than I thought. "You've forgotten everything. Why I did what I did. You've been so caught up in your own short-sightedness that you've missed the big picture I was looking at." I racked my brain, thinking back to that time last fall. He was right. My focus had been on the wrongs he'd committed against Lissa and me personally. I'd forgotten other conversations, his insane explanations of his grand scheme. "You wanted to stage a revolution. Still want to. That's crazy. It's not going to happen," I said. "It's already happening. Do you think I don't know what's going on out in the world? I still have contacts. People can be bought off. How do you think I was able to send that message? I know about the unrest. I know about Natasha Ozera's movement to get Moroi to fight with Guardians. You stand by her and vilify me, Rosemary. But I pushed for the very same thing last fall, yet somehow you don't seem to regard her in the same way." "Tasha Ozera is working on her cause a bit differently than you did," noted Dmitri. "And that's why she's getting nowhere," Victor retorted. "Tatiana and her council are being held back by centuries of archaic traditions. So long as that sort of power rules us, nothing will change. We will never learn to fight. Non-royal Moroi will never have a voice. Dampiers like you will continually be sent out to battle." "It's what we dedicate our lives to," said Dmitri. I could sense the tension building in him. He might show better self-control than me, but I knew he was getting just as frustrated here. "And it's what you lose your lives for. You're all but enslaved and don't even realize it. And for what? Why do you protect us?" "Because we need you," I faltered, "for our race to survive." "You don't need to throw yourselves into battle for that. Making children isn't really that difficult." I ignored his quip. "And because the Moroi and their magic are important. They can do amazing things." Victor threw his hands up in exasperation. "We used to do amazing things. Humans used to revere us as gods, but over time, we grew lazy. The advent of technology made our magic more and more obsolete. Now, all we do is parlor tricks." "If you have so many ideas," said Dmitri, with a dangerous glint in his dark eyes, "then do something useful in prison and write a manifesto." "And what's this have to do with Lissa anyway?" I asked. "Because Vasilisa is a vehicle for change." I stared incredulously. "You think she's going to lead your revolution?" "Well, I'd prefer that I lead it, someday. But regardless, I think that she's going to be a part of it. I've heard about her, too. She's a rising star. Still young, certainly, but people are taking notice. All royals aren't created equally, you know. The Dragomir symbol is a dragon, the king of beasts. Likewise, the Dragomir blood has always been powerful. That's why the Strigoi have targeted them so consistently. A Dragomir returning to power is no small thing, particularly one such as her. My impression from the reports is that she must have mastered her magic. If that's so, with her gifts, there's no telling what she could do. People are drawn to her with almost no effort on her part, and when she actually tries to influence them, well, they'll do anything she wants." His eyes were wide as he spoke, wonder and happiness on his face as he imagined Lissa living out his dreams. "Unbelievable," I said. "First, you wanted to hide her away to keep you alive. Now you actually want her out in the world to use her compulsion for your own psycho plans?" "I told you, she's a force for change. And like you being shadow-kissed, she's the only one of her kind that we know about. That makes her dangerous. And very valuable." Well, that was something. Victor wasn't all-knowing after all. He didn't know about Adrian's spirit use. "Lissa will never do it," I said. "She's not going to abuse her powers." "And Victor's not going to say anything about us," said Dmitri, tugging my arm. "He's achieved his goal. He brought you here because he wanted to know about Lissa." "He didn't find much out," I said. "You'd be surprised," said Victor. He grinned at Dmitri. "And what makes you so certain I won't enlighten the world about your romantic indiscretions?" "Because it won't save you from prison. And if you ruin Rose, you'll destroy whatever weak chance you had of Lissa helping you with your warped fantasy." Victor flinched just a little. Dmitri was right. Dmitri stepped forward, pressing close to the bars as I had earlier. I'd thought I had a scary voice, but when he spoke his next words, I realized I wasn't even close. "And it'll all be pointless anyway, because you won't stay alive long enough in prison to stage your grand plans. You aren't the only one with connections." My breath caught a little. Dmitri brought so many things to my life: love, comfort, and instruction. I got so used to him sometimes that I forgot just how dangerous he could be. As he stood there, tall and threatening while he glared down at Victor, I felt a chill run down my spine. I remembered how when I had first come to the academy, people had said Dmitri was a god. In this moment, he looked it. If Victor was frightened by Dmitri's threat, he didn't show it. His jade-green eyes glanced between the two of us. You two are a match made in heaven, or somewhere. See you in court, I said. Dmitri and I left. On our way out, he said a few words in Russian to the guardian on duty. From their manners, my guess was Dmitri was offering thanks. We ventured outdoors, walking across a wide, beautiful park-like space to get back to our rooms. The sleet had stopped, and it had left everything, buildings and trees alike, coated in ice. It was like the world was made of glass. Glancing at Dmitri, I saw him staring straight ahead. It was hard to tell while walking, but I could have sworn he was shaking. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Yes." "You sure?" "As okay as I can be." "Do you think he'll tell everyone about us?" "No." We walked in silence for a bit. I finally asked the question I'd been dying to know. "Did you mean it? That if Victor did tell, that you'd—" I couldn't finish. I couldn't bring myself to say the words, "have him killed." I don't have much influence in the upper levels of Moroi royalty, but I have plenty among the guardians who handle the dirty work in our world. You didn't answer the question. If you'd really do it. I do a lot of things to protect you, Rosa. My heart pounded. He only used Rosa when he was feeling particularly affectionate toward me. It wouldn't exactly be protecting me. It'd be after the fact, cold-blooded. You don't do that kind of thing, I told him. Revenge is more my thing. I'll have to kill him. I meant it as a joke, but he didn't think it was funny. Don't talk like that, and anyway, it doesn't matter. Victor's not going to say anything. He left me to go to his own room when we got inside. As I was opening the door to mine, Lissa rounded the hall corner. There you are. What happened? You missed dinner. I'd completely forgotten. Sorry, got carried away with some guardian stuff. A long story. She'd changed for dinner. Her hair was still pulled up, and she now wore a form-fitting dress made out of silver raw silk. She looked beautiful. She looked royal. I thought about Victor's words and wondered if she really could be the power for change he swore she was. Looking like she did now, so glamorous and self-composed, I could imagine people following her anywhere. I certainly would, but then I was biased. Why are you looking at me like that? She asked with a small smile. I couldn't tell her that I'd just seen the man who frightened her the most. I couldn't tell her that while she'd been out living it up, I'd been off watching her back in the shadows, like I always do. Instead, I returned her smile. I like the dress. Chapter 14. About a half hour before my alarm was scheduled to go off the next morning, I heard a knock at my door. I expected it to be Lissa, but a sleepy check of our bond showed that she was still fast asleep. Puzzled, I staggered out of the bed and opened the door. A Moroi girl I didn't recognize handed me some folded clothes with a note attached. I wondered if I should tip her or something, but she left too quickly for me to react. I sat back on my bed and unfolded the clothing. Black slacks, white blouse, and a black jacket. It was the same ensemble that the other guardians wore around here, and it was in my size. Wow. I was about to become part of the team. A slow grin spread over my face, and I opened the note. It was in Dimitri's writing. Wear your hair up. The grin stayed on my face. A lot of female guardians cut their hair to show off their Molnia marks. I'd reluctantly considered it once, and Dimitri had told me not to. He loved my hair and had told me to wear it up. The way he'd said it back then had given me chills, just like now. An hour later, I was on my way to the trial with Lissa, Christian, and Eddie. Someone had rustled up a black and white outfit for Eddie, too, and I think we both kind of felt like kids playing dress-up with their parents' clothing. My cropped jacket and stretchy blouse were actually pretty cute, and I wondered if I'd be able to bring these back with me. The courtroom was over in the large, ornate building we'd passed upon arrival. Walking through its halls, I saw a mix of the old and the new. Outside, it was all arched windows and stone spires. Inside, it was a hub of modern activity. People worked in offices with flat-screen monitors. Elevators led to upper floors. Yet, despite that, a few antique touches could still be found. Sculptures on pedestals, chandeliers in the halls. The courtroom itself had beautiful murals that stretched from floor to ceiling, and in front of the room, seals from all the royal families hung on the walls. Lissa stopped as we walked in, her eyes falling on the Dragomir dragon, king of the beasts. A sea of conflicting emotions swirled within her as she stared at the seal, and felt the full weight of being the only one left to carry on her name. Pride to be part of that family. Fear that she wouldn't be good enough to live up to the name. Giving her a gentle nudge, I urged her on toward our seats. The seating was split by an aisle down the middle of the room. We sat at the front of the right-hand section. There were still several minutes to go before proceedings began, but the room wasn't very full yet. I suspected that wouldn't change due to the secrecy surrounding what had happened with Victor. A judge sat at the front, but there was no jury. An elevated seat on one side of the room marked where the Queen would sit when she arrived. She would be the one who made the ultimate decision. That was how it worked with royal criminal cases. I pointed it out to Lissa. Let's hope that she's against him. Looks like she'll be the only one making the decision. Lissa frowned. Not having a jury feels kind of weird. That's because we spend so much time around humans. She smiled. Maybe. I don't know. Just seems like there's a lot of room for corruption. Well, yeah. This is Victor we're talking about. Moments later, Prince Victor Dashkov himself entered the courtroom. Or rather, just Victor Dashkov did. He'd been stripped of his title when he'd been imprisoned. It had gone to the next oldest person in the Dashkov family. Fear shot through Lissa, and the little color that was in her cheeks completely disappeared. Mingled with that fear was an emotion I hadn't expected. Regret. Before he'd kidnapped her, Victor had been like an uncle to her. That was even how she'd referred to him. She'd loved him, and he'd betrayed her. I put my hand over hers. Easy, I murmured. It's going to be okay. His eyes, narrowed and cunning, looked around the courtroom as though it were a party. He had that same unconcerned look he'd had while talking to Dimitri and me. I felt my lips curl into a sneer. A red haze tinged my vision, and I worked hard to be as serene as the other guardians in the room. He finally focused on Lissa, and she flinched at seeing the same eye color she and others of her family had. When he nodded a sort of greeting to her, I felt my control snap. Before I could actually do anything, I felt new words in my mind. Lissa's. Breathe, Rose. Just breathe. It looked like we were going to have to rely on each other to get through this. A heartbeat later, Victor was walking again, off to take his seat on the left side of the room. Thanks, I said to her once he was gone. It's like you could read my mind. No, she said gently. I could just feel your hand. I looked down at where I'd put my hand over hers. I'd done it to comfort her, and had ended up clenching her fingers in my own agitation. Yikes, I said, jerking away and hoping I hadn't broken her bones. Sorry. Queen Tatiana's entrance followed his, which distracted me and helped calm my dark feelings. We all stood when she appeared and then knelt. It was all kind of archaic, but it was a custom the Moroi had held onto over the years. We didn't rise until she took her seat, and then the rest of us were able to sit too. The trial started. One by one, those who had witnessed the events of Victor gave their account of what they'd seen. Largely, this involved the guardians who had pursued Lissa when Victor had taken her away and who had subsequently been part of the raid on Victor's hideout. Dmitri was the last of the guardians to go. On the surface, his testimony wasn't much different than theirs. They'd all been part of the rescue squad, but his part in the story had begun a little earlier. I was with my student, Rose Hathaway, he said. She shares a bond with the princess, and was the first to sense what had happened. Victor's lawyer, I couldn't even imagine how they'd gotten anyone to represent him, glanced at some papers and then looked back up at Dmitri. Based on the events, it sounds like there was a delay between when she discovered that and when you alerted the others. Dmitri nodded, his mask of composure never slipping. She couldn't act on it because Mr. Dashkov had inflicted a charm on her, one that caused her to attack me. He spoke the words so levelly, it amazed me. Not even the lawyer seemed to notice anything. Only I could see. Or maybe it was just because I knew him, how much it hurt for Dmitri to lie. Oh, he wanted to protect us, wanted to protect me in particular, which was why he was doing this. But it killed a piece of him to stand up there under oath and lie. Dmitri was not perfect, no matter how much I thought he was some days, but he always tried to be truthful. Today he couldn't be. Mr. Dashkov works with earth magic, and some who use that power and are strong in compulsion can influence our base instincts, continued Dmitri. In this case, he affected her anger and violence through an object. Off to my left, I heard a sound, like someone choking on their own laughter. The judge, an elderly but fierce Moroi woman, glared. Mr. Dashkov, please respect the decorum of this courtroom. Victor, still smiling, waved his hands in apology. I'm terribly sorry, Your Honor, and Your Majesty. Something in Guardian Belikov's testimony just tickled my fancy, that's all. It won't happen again. I held my breath, waiting for the blow to fall. It didn't. Dmitri finished his statement, and then Christian was called up. His part was short. He'd been with Lissa when she'd been taken and had been knocked out. His contribution was being able to ID some of Victor's guardians as the kidnappers. Once Christian sat down, it was my turn. I walked up, hoping I looked calm in front of all those eyes, and in front of Victor. In fact, I went out of my way not to look at him at all. As I said my name and gave my oath to tell the truth, I suddenly felt the full force of what Dmitri must have experienced. I was standing before all these people, swearing to be honest, but I would lie in an instant if the lust charm came up. My version was pretty straightforward. I had details to offer from before the night of the kidnapping, like about when Victor had laid his sick traps to test Lys's power. Otherwise, my story lined up with Dimitri's and the other guardians. I'd said before that I could lie well, and I brushed over the attack charm part with such ease that no one paid any attention, except Victor. Despite my refusal to look at him, I inadvertently glanced in his direction when I mentioned the charm. His eyes bored into me, and a small smirk sat on his lips. His smugness, I realized, was more than just because he knew I was lying. It was also because he actually knew the precise truth. And the look he gave me told me that he had that power over me and Dimitri. The power to ruin everything for us in front of all these people, no matter what Dimitri had threatened. All the while, I kept my face calm enough to make Dimitri proud, but inside my chest my heart thudded loudly. It seemed to last forever, but I knew I was only on the stand for a few minutes. I finished, sagging with relief that Victor hadn't called me out, and then it was Lys's turn. As the victim, she offered the first new perspective thus far, and everyone there grew caught up in her story. It was compelling. No one had ever heard anything like it. I also realized that without even trying, Lyssa was using her spirit-induced charisma. I think it came from the same place compulsion did. People were enraptured and sympathetic. When Lyssa described the torture Victor had put her through to force her to heal him, I saw faces go pale with shock. Even Tatiana's stern mask faltered a little, though whether she felt pity or just simple surprise, I couldn't say. The most amazing thing, though, was how calmly Lyssa managed to deliver the story. On the outside, she was steady and beautiful, but as she spoke the words, describing exactly how Victor's henchmen had tortured her, she relived the pain and terror of that night. The guy had been an air user, and he toyed with that element, sometimes taking it away so she couldn't breathe, and at other times smothering her with it. It had been horrible, and I'd experienced it right along with her. In fact, I experienced it with her again now, as she spoke about the events on the stand. Each painful detail was still etched in her mind, the pain echoing back to both of us. We were both relieved when her testimony finished. Finally, it was Victor's turn. From the look on his face, you never would have guessed he was on trial. He wasn't angry or outraged. He wasn't contrite. He didn't plead. He looked like we were all hanging out somewhere, like he had nothing in the world to worry about. Somehow, that made me that much angrier. Even when answering, he spoke as though he made perfect sense. When the prosecuting lawyer asked why he'd done what he had, he looked at her as though she were crazy. "Why, I had no choice," he said pleasantly. "I was dying. No one was going to condone me openly experimenting with the princess's powers. What would you have done in my place?" The lawyer ignored that. She was having a hard time keeping the disgust off her face. "And you found coaxing your own daughter into turning Strigoi also necessary?" Everyone in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably. One of the most awful things about Strigoi was that they were made, not born. A Strigoi could force a human, a Dhampir, or a Moroi into becoming Strigoi if the Strigoi drank the victim's blood and then fed Strigoi blood back to the victim. It didn't matter if the victim wanted it or not, and once she became Strigoi, she lost all sense of her old moral self. She embraced becoming a monster and killing others to survive. Strigoi converted others if they found someone they thought would strengthen their ranks. Sometimes they did it just out of cruelty. The other way a Strigoi could be made was if a Moroi willingly chose to kill another person during feeding, destroying all the magic and life within themselves. Christian's parents had done that because they wanted to be immortal, no matter the cost. Victor's daughter, Natalie, had done it because he had talked her into it. The extra strength and speed she'd gotten from being a Strigoi had helped her free him, and he'd felt his goals were worth the sacrifice. Again, Victor showed no remorse. His answer was simple. Natalie made that decision. Can you say that about everyone you use to meet your ends? Guardian Belikov and Miss Hathaway had no say in what you made them do. Victor chuckled. Well, that's a matter of opinion. I honestly don't think they minded. But if you have the time after this case, Your Honor, you might want to consider trying a statutory rape case. I froze. He'd done it. He'd really done it. I expected everyone in the room to turn and point at Dmitri and me. No one even looked in our direction, though. Most people were giving Victor appalled looks. I realized that was exactly what Victor had known would happen. He just wanted to tease us. He didn't actually expect anyone to take him seriously. Lissa's feelings through the bond confirmed as much. She felt like Victor was trying to shift attention off himself by making up stories about Dmitri and me. She was horrified that Victor would stoop so low. The judge was too, and she chastised Victor for getting off topic. By that point, most of the questioning was done. The lawyers wrapped up, and it was time for the Queen to deliver her verdict. I held my breath again, wondering what she would do. He hadn't denied any of the charges. The evidence was overwhelming thanks to my friend's testimonies. But as even Victor had pointed out, there was a lot of corruption among royals. The Queen could very well decide that she didn't want the scandal involved with imprisoning someone so well known. Even if no one knew the details, his imprisonment would start a buzz. Maybe she didn't want to deal with that. Maybe Victor had bought her off too. But in the end, she found Victor guilty and sentenced him to life in prison. A different prison, not the one at court. I'd heard stories about Moroi prisons, and they were terrible places. I suspected his new home would be very different from the cell we'd found him in. Victor remained calm and amused throughout it all, just as he had yesterday. I didn't like that. The conversation I'd had with him made me think he wasn't going to accept this as serenely as he pretended. I hoped they'd watch him closely. A gesture from the Queen ended formalities. The rest of us stood up and began talking while she surveyed the room with a sharp eye, probably taking notes. Victor's escort started to lead him out. He passed by us again. This time, he stopped and spoke. Vasilisa, I trust you've been well. She didn't answer. She still hated and feared him, but with this verdict, she finally believed he could no longer hurt her. It was like the end of a chapter she'd been stuck in for months. She could finally move on and hopefully let those horrible memories fade. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk, but I'm sure we will next time, he added. Come on, said one of the guardians with him. They led him away. He's crazy, muttered Lissa once he was gone. I can't believe he said that stuff about you and Dmitri. Dmitri was standing behind her. I looked up and met his eyes as he moved past us. His relief mirrored my own. We'd danced with danger today, and we'd won. Christian came up to her and hugged her, holding her for a long time. I watched them fondly, surprised at my own kind feelings for them. When a hand touched my arm, I jumped. It was Adrian. You okay, little Dampier? He asked softly. Dashkov said a few, suggestive things. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low as well. No one believed him. I think it's okay. Thanks for asking, though. He smiled and tapped my nose. 2 thank yous in as many days? I don't suppose I'll get to see any, special gratitude? I scoffed. Nope, you'll just have to imagine it. He gave me a half hug and released me. Fair enough, but I have a good imagination. We started to leave, and then Priscilla Voda hurried over to Lissa. The Queen would like to meet with you before you leave, in private. I glanced over to the raised chair where the Queen sat. Her gaze was fixed on us, and I wondered what this could be about. Sure, said Lissa, as confused as I was. To me, she sent through the bond, will you listen again? I gave her a quick nod before Priscilla spirited her off. I returned to my room, tuning into Lissa while I packed my things up. It took a little while because Tatiana had to finish a few courtroom formalities, but she finally arrived in the same room as yesterday. Lissa and Priscilla bowed as she entered and waited for the Queen to sit. Tatiana made herself comfortable. Vasilisa, you need to be in the air soon, so I'll make this brief. I would like to make an offer to you. What kind of an offer, Your Majesty? You'll need to go to college soon. She spoke like it was a done deal, and yeah, Lissa did plan on going to college, but I didn't like the presumption. I understand you're dissatisfied with your choices. Well, it's not that I'm dissatisfied exactly, it's just, all the places Maroi are supposed to go are small. I mean, I understand it's for safety, but I don't know. I'd like to go somewhere bigger, somewhere prestigious. Guardians monitored a handful of select colleges in the country so that Maroi could safely attend them. As Lissa had noted, though, they tended to be smaller schools. Tatiana nodded impatiently, like she already knew this. I'm going to give you an opportunity that no one else has ever been given, to my knowledge. After graduation, I would like you to come live here, at the royal court. You have no family, and I think you'd benefit from learning politics right in the heart of our government. Along with this, we would make arrangements for you to attend Lehigh University. It's less than an hour from here. Have you heard of it? Lissa nodded. I'd never heard of it, but she was enough of a nerd to have researched every college in the U.S. It's a good school, Your Majesty, but still small. It's bigger than the ones Maroi usually attend, she pointed out. True. In her mind, Lissa was trying to puzzle out what was going on here. Why was Tatiana making this offer? Especially considering how she'd seemed to disagree with Lissa earlier. There was something weird going on here, and she decided to see how far she could push it. The University of Pennsylvania isn't that far either, Your Majesty. That school is enormous, Vasilisa. We couldn't ensure your safety there. Lissa shrugged. Well, then it probably doesn't matter if I go to Lehigh or one of the others. The Queen looked shocked. So did Priscilla. They couldn't believe Lissa seemed indifferent to the offer. Truthfully, Lissa wasn't indifferent. Lehigh was a step up from what she'd expected, and she wanted to go. But she also wanted to see how badly the Queen wanted her to go. Tatiana frowned and appeared to be weighing matters. Depending on your grades and experiences at Lehigh, we could possibly arrange for you to transfer in a couple years. Again, the safety logistics would be very difficult. Wow! The Queen did want her around. But why? Lissa decided to simply ask. I'm very flattered, Your Majesty, and grateful. But why are you offering me this? As the last Dragomir, you're a precious commodity. I'd like to make sure your future is secure, and I do so hate to see bright minds wasted. Besides," she paused, hesitant to speak her next words. "You were right, to a certain extent. The Moroi do have trouble changing. It could be useful to have a dissenting voice around here." Lissa didn't answer right away. She was still analyzing this offer from every possible angle. She wished I was there to advise her, but I wasn't sure I'd have much of an opinion. Splitting my guardian duty between the court and a cool university could be pretty neat. On the other hand, we'd have more freedom elsewhere. In the end, Lissa decided in favor of higher education. "All right," she said at last. "I accept. Thank you, Your Majesty." "Excellent," said Tatiana. "We'll see that the arrangements are made. You may go now." The Queen made no signs of moving, so Lissa bowed again and scurried to the door, still reeling with this news. Tatiana suddenly called out to her, "Vasilisa, will you send your friend here to talk to me, the Hathaway girl?" "Rose?" she asked in astonishment. "Why do you—" "Yes, of course, I'll get her." Lissa hurried toward guest housing, but I met her halfway. "What's going on?" I asked. "I have no idea," said Lissa. "Did you hear what she said?" "Yep. Maybe she wants to tell me how I have to be extra careful with you going to that school." "Maybe. I don't know." Lissa gave me a quick hug. "Good luck. I'll see you soon." I went to the same room and found Tatiana standing with her hands clasped, posture stiff and impatient. She was dressed like a corporate businesswoman again, with a sleek brown blazer and skirt set. That color wouldn't have been my first choice to go with her dark gray hair, but that was her style advisor's problem, not mine. I bowed, just as Lissa had, and glanced around the room. Priscilla was gone. Only a couple guardians remained. I expected Tatiana to tell me to sit, but instead, she stood up and walked right over to me. Her face did not look happy. "Miss Hathaway," she said sharply, "I'm going to keep this brief. You are going to stop this atrocious affair you're having with my great-nephew. Immediately." Chapter 15. What? You heard me. I don't know how far things have gone, and honestly, I really don't want to know the details. That's not the point. The point is that it's going to go no further. The Queen was looking down on me, hands on her hips, clearly waiting for me to swear I'd do whatever she wanted. Except I kind of couldn't. I glanced around the room, certain this was some sort of joke. I looked at the two guardians across the room, half hoping they'd explain what was going on, but they were doing that seeing without actually seeing thing. No eye contact. I turned back to the Queen. Your Majesty? There's been some kind of mistake. There's nothing going on between Adrian and me." "Do you think I'm an idiot?" she asked. Wow, that was an opening. "No, Your Majesty." "Well, that's a start. There's no point in lying to me. People have seen you together, here and back at your school. I saw you myself in the courtroom." Damn it, why had Adrian chosen that moment to be chivalrous and sneak another hug? "I've heard all the illicit details about what's going on, and it's going to stop right here, right now. Adrian Ivashkov is not going to run off with some cheap Dampier girl, so you might as well rid yourself of that delusion right now." "I never thought he was going to—" "Seeing as how we're not involved," I said. "I mean, we're friends, that's all. He likes me, he's a flirt. And if you want to talk illicit stuff, then yeah, I'm pretty sure he's got a list of illicit things he'd like to do with me. Lots of illicit things. But we're not doing them. Your Majesty." As soon as the words left my mouth, I felt like an idiot. From the look on her face, however, it didn't seem like things could really get any worse for me. "I know about you," she said. "All anyone talks about are your recent awards and accolades, but I haven't forgotten that it was you who took Vasilisa away. I also know about the trouble you used to get into. I know about the drinking, about the men. If it was up to me, I'd pack you up and send you off to some blood whore commune. You'd probably fit in well." Drinking and men? She made me sound like an alcoholic prostitute when honestly, I'd probably drunk no more than other teenagers at high school parties. Telling her this seemed useless, though. Pointing out that I was still a virgin probably wouldn't have made much of a difference either. "But," she continued, "your recent achievements make sending you away impossible. Everyone believes you have some glorious future ahead of you. Maybe you do. Regardless, if I can't stop you from being a guardian, I can affect whose guardian you are." I stiffened. "What are you saying? Are you threatening me?" I spoke the words tentatively, not as a challenge. She couldn't be serious. Taking me away from Lissa during the field experience was one thing, but we were talking about an entirely different matter now. "I'm just saying I have a great interest in Vasilisa's future, that's all. And if I have to protect her from corrupting influences, I will. We can find her another guardian. We can find you another Moroi." "You can't do that!" I exclaimed. I could tell by the look on her face that she was happy to finally get a real reaction out of me. I was both angry and afraid, and I fought hard against my normal explosive instincts. Diplomacy and honesty were what I needed now. "I'm not doing anything with Adrian, really. You can't punish me for something I'm not doing." I quickly remembered to add, "Your Majesty." "I don't want to punish you at all, Rose. I just want to make sure we understand each other. Moroi men don't marry Dampier girls. They play with them. Every girl thinks it's going to be different with her. Even your mother did with Ibrahim. But she was wrong, too." "With who?" I asked, the name hitting me like a slap in the face. Ibrahim? I'd never heard of that name, let alone someone called that. I wanted to ask who he was and what his connection to my mother was, but Tatiana just kept talking. "They're always wrong, and you can try your hardest to change that, but it's a waste of time." She shook her head, like she felt sorry for these Dampier girls, but her smug air contradicted any true sympathy. "You can use your pretty face and easy body as much as you want, but in the end, you're the one who'll get used. He may say he loves you now, but in the end he'll get tired of you. Save yourself the grief. I'm doing you a favor." "But he isn't saying he loves—" There was no point. The ironic thing here was that I was fairly certain Adrian did just want to use me for sex. I didn't have any delusions about that. But seeing as I wasn't actually sleeping with him, there was no problem, except, well, that Tatiana seemed to see all of this as a problem. I sighed, suspecting no argument was going to make her believe that I wasn't interested in Adrian. "Look, if you're so certain we can't have a future together, then why are you telling me this? According to you, he's going to throw me away anyway, Your Majesty." She hesitated for just a second, and I nearly laughed. Despite her trash-talking about me, my mom, and other Dampiers, some part of her really was worried that I might indeed be charming and pretty enough to seduce Adrian into a disgraceful marriage. She quickly hid her uncertainty. I like to take care of things before they become messy, that's all. Besides, it's going to make things easier for him and Vasilisa if they aren't dragging around baggage from you. Whoa! My moment of brief satisfaction shattered into confusion. I was as lost now as I'd been when she first started accusing me of being involved with Adrian. Him and Vasilisa? Lissa? What are you talking about? I forgot the Your Majesty, but I don't think she cared at this point. The two of them are an excellent match, she said, sounding like she was about ready to purchase some artwork. Despite your bad influence, Vasilisa's grown into a very promising young woman. She has a very serious, very dedicated nature that will cure some of his recklessness, and being together would allow them to continue examining their unusual magical situation. 5 minutes ago, me marrying Adrian had been the craziest thing I'd ever heard. It had just been trumped, however, by the thought of Lissa marrying Adrian. Lissa and Adrian? Together? You can't be serious, Your Majesty. If they're both here together, I think they'll come around to it. They already have a certain charisma around each other. Plus, both of Adrian's grandmothers came from branches of the Dragomir family. He has more than enough blood to help her carry on the Dragomir line. So does Christian Ozara. In one of their more disgustingly cute moments, Lissa and Christian had looked up his family tree to see if he had enough Dragomir genes to be able to pass on the name. When they found out he did, they then started naming their future children. It had been horrible. I'd left after Lissa told me they'd name their third daughter after me. Christian Ozara? That condescending smile of hers tightened. There's no way Vasilisa Dragomir is going to marry him. Well, yeah, not anytime soon. I mean, they're going to go to college and... Not now, not ever, interrupted Tatiana. The Dragomirs are an ancient and exalted line of royalty. Their last descendant is not going to attach herself to someone like him. He's royal, I said in a low voice that was on the verge of becoming my scary voice. For whatever reason, her insulting Christian made me angrier than her insulting me. The Ozara line is every bit as important as the Dragomirs and Ivashkovs. He's royal, just like Lissa, like Adrian, and like you. She snorted. He is not like us. Yes, the Ozaras are one of the royal houses, and yes, he has several respectable distant cousins, but we aren't talking about them. We're talking about the son of someone who purposely became a Strigoi. Do you know how many times that's happened in my lifetime? 9. 9 in 50 years, and his parents were 2 of them. Yes, his parents, I said, not him. It doesn't matter. The Dragomir princess cannot associate with someone like him. That position is simply too prestigious. But your nephew is the perfect choice, I said bitterly. Your Majesty. If you're such a smart girl, then you tell me. Back at St. Vladimir's, how are they treated? How do your classmates view Christian? How do they view Christian and Vasilisa together? Her eyes gleamed knowingly. Fine, I said. They have lots of friends. And Christian is fully accepted? Immediately I thought of Jessie and Ralph grilling me about Christian. And yes, there were plenty of people who still avoided Christian like he was already Strigoi. It was why he'd had no partner in culinary science. I tried to hide my thoughts, but my hesitation had given me away. You see? She exclaimed. And that's just a microcosm of society. Imagine it on a bigger scale. Imagine how it would be when she's active in the government and trying to get others to support her. He'll be a liability. She'll make enemies just because of him. Do you really want that to happen to her? It was exactly what Christian had feared, and I denied it now as much as I had to him. It won't happen. You're wrong. And you're very young, Miss Hathaway. You're also delaying your flight. She moved toward the door. The guardians across the room were by her side in the blink of an eye. I have nothing more to say, and hope this will be the last time we ever have a discussion like this. Or any discussion, I thought. She left, and as soon as etiquette said I could go, I sprinted off to catch my plane. My head reeled as I went. How insane was that lady? Not only was she convinced that I was on the verge of eloping with Adrian, she also believed that she could work some kind of arranged marriage with him and Lissa. It was almost impossible to figure out which part of that conversation had been the most ridiculous. I could hardly wait to tell the others what had happened and have a good laugh over it. But as I returned to my room to get my bag, I reconsidered. There was already so much gossip about me and Adrian going around, I didn't think I should be fueling the fire. I also didn't think Christian should hear about this. He was already insecure about his position with Lissa. How would he feel if he found out the Queen was already making plans to get rid of him? So I decided to sit on the information for a while, which was hard because Lissa was practically waiting outside my door when I got back. "Hey," I said. "I thought you'd be on the plane." "Nope. They delayed it by a few hours." "Oh." Going home suddenly sounded like the best idea ever. "What'd the Queen want?" asked Lissa. "To congratulate me," I said glibly, "over my Strigoi kills. I didn't expect that from her. It was kind of weird." "Not that weird," she said. "What you did was amazing. I'm sure she just wanted to recognize you for what you did." "Yeah, I guess. So, what's going on? What are we going to do with the extra time?" There was excitement in both her eyes and her feelings, and I welcomed a change in subject. "Well, I was thinking, since we're at the royal court, don't you want to check it out? There's got to be more to it than a bar and a coffee shop. Seems like we should know this stuff if we're going to be living here. Besides, we've got a lot to celebrate." The full force of our situation hit me. I'd been so distracted by Victor that I hadn't even really let things sink in. We were at the royal court, the center of Moroi leadership. It was nearly as big as the academy, and there had to be more to it than the all-business side we'd seen so far. Plus, she was right. We had a lot to be happy about. Victor had been put away. She'd gotten a sweet college deal. Only my alleged affair with Adrian had been a downside, but I was willing to put that aside as Lissa's contagious excitement seized me. "Where's Christian?" I asked. "Doing his own thing," she said. "You think we need him along?" "Well, he usually is along lately." "Yeah," she admitted, "but I'd kind of like just us to hang out." I sensed the thoughts behind her decision. Our brief conversation just before she'd gone to see the Queen had made her nostalgic for the old days, back when it had just been the two of us on our own. "No complaints here," I said. "How much can we cover in 3 hours?" A mischievous grin lit her face. The essentials. I could tell she had something special in mind, but she was trying to keep it hidden. She couldn't block me out of the bond, but she had learned that if she didn't think too hard about certain things, then I wouldn't pick up on them easily. She liked being able to think that she could surprise me sometimes. Trying to hide big issues or problems from me never worked, though. We set back out into the cold weather with Lissa leading the way. She steered us away from the administrative buildings, off toward some others set at the farther end of the court's grounds. "The Queen lives in that first building," Lissa explained.